The bullet struck the windowsill inches from Rebecca Norton's face, splintering wood across the general store counter as she dove behind a barrel of flour. She could hear them outside, 3 men shouting her name like a curse, demanding she come out and face what she owed. But Rebecca Norton owed nothing except maybe an apology to herself for ever believing a man's promises in the first place. That had been 6 months ago in Kansas City, before she fled west with nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of broken glass. Now here she was in North Platte, Nebraska in the summer of 1878, hiding like a rabbit while the men her former fiancé sent came to collect on debts that were never hers to begin with. The store owner, Mr. Hutchins, had already scrambled out the back door, leaving her alone with the smell of gunpowder and her own ragged breathing. Another shot rang out, this one taking out the front window entirely. Glass rained down like ice in July, and Rebecca pressed herself smaller against the barrel, her fingers gripping the fabric of her worn blue dress. She had sworn after Thomas betrayed her, after he gambled away money using her name as collateral, after he disappeared and left her holding all the consequences, that she would never trust another man as long as she lived. That promise had kept her alive these past months, kept her moving, kept her sharp. Rebecca Norton. The voice outside belonged to a man named Calhoun, a debt collector with a reputation for breaking bones first and asking questions later. You got 10 seconds to show yourself before we come in there and drag you out. She closed her eyes, calculating her options. The back door was 15 feet away. She could make a run for it, but they probably had someone watching the alley. The second floor had a window that overlooked the feed store next door, but the stairs creaked like a banshee and they would hear her climbing. Her hand moved to the small derringer she kept in her pocket, the one thing of value she had managed to keep. 2 shots, 3 men. The mathematics of survival were not in her favor. That was when she heard the voice, calm as Sunday morning, coming from somewhere outside. You boys looking for someone? Rebecca risked a glance through the shattered window. A man sat on horseback in the middle of the street, positioned directly between the store and Calhoun's gang. He wore a dusty brown hat, a faded blue shirt, and had the kind of weathered face that came from years under the Nebraska sun. His hands rested easy on his saddle horn, but Rebecca noticed the way his right hand stayed close to the gun on his hip. "Ain't your business, cowboy," Calhoun said. "Ride on." "Well, that's interesting," the cowboy said, his voice carrying that slow western drawl that made every word sound like he had all the time in the world. "Because I was just in that store buying supplies when you boys started shooting up the place. Made me spill good tobacco. That sort of makes it my business." Calhoun stepped forward, his 2 companions flanking him. "You want to die for a woman you don't even know," the cowboy tilted his head, considering. "Don't know about dying, but I know about manners. And shooting at stores in broad daylight scaring decent folk, that shows a lack of manners. My mama raised me better than that, and I expect yours did too." Rebecca watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. This stranger was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, and she could not figure out which. She did not want his help. She did not want anyone's help. Help from men came with strings attached, with expectations and demands and eventually betrayal. But she also did not want to die in a general store surrounded by flour and broken glass. "Last chance, cowboy," Calhoun said, his hand moving toward his gun. The stranger's expression never changed. "I can wait," he said simply. The street fell silent except for the wind pushing dust devils down the center of town. Rebecca could see people peeking from windows, could sense the entire town holding its breath. These moments before violence always felt stretched thin, like the world was pulling itself tight before snapping. Calhoun's hand moved first. He was faster than Rebecca expected, but the cowboy was faster. The shot cracked through the air before Calhoun's gun cleared leather, and the debt collector stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. The cowboy's gun swung to cover the other two men before they could draw. "Drop them," the cowboy said, and his voice had not changed at all, still calm, still patient. "Drop them and get your friend to a doctor. Then I suggest you boys leave North Platte and don't come back." The two men looked at each other, looked at their boss bleeding in the street, and made the smart choice. They dropped their guns and hauled Calhoun up between them, half carrying him toward their horses. Within minutes, they were riding east, leaving nothing but dust and blood in the dirt. The cowboy dismounted slowly, his eyes scanning the street before he turned toward the store. Rebecca stood up from behind the barrel, her legs shaking despite her best efforts to control them. When he stepped through the broken doorway, she got her first good look at him. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed a trim and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. There was a scar along his jaw, faded and old, and his hands were calloused from hard work. "You hurt, miss?" he asked. "No," Rebecca said, forcing her voice steady, "and I did not ask for your help." He smiled slightly, not offended. "No, you did not, but you got it anyway. Name's William Barrett. Most folks call me Will." "I did not ask for your name either," Rebecca said, moving toward the door. She needed to leave, needed to get her things from the boarding house and move on to the next town. That was how she survived now, always moving, never staying long enough for trouble to catch up or for anyone to get close enough to hurt her. Will Barrett stepped aside to let her pass, but he followed her out into the street. "Those men will come back, you know. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but men like that don't forget." "That is my problem, not yours," Rebecca said, walking quickly toward the boarding house at the end of the street. Her heart was still racing, adrenaline making her hands shake, but she kept her spine straight and her chin up. "Could be," Will said, keeping pace with her easily. "But I was thinking if you needed somewhere to go, somewhere those men would not think to look, I might know a place." Rebecca stopped walking and turned to face him. Why would you help me? What do you want?" The questions came out sharper than she intended, laced with all the bitterness of the past year. Will Barrett looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his eyes that looked almost like understanding. "Don't want anything," he said. "Except maybe to help someone who looks like they could use it." "I do not need help," Rebecca said. "I do not need anything from you or any other man. Do you understand? I said I would never trust another man as long as I lived, and I meant it." Will nodded slowly, like she had just told him something important that he needed to remember. "All right," he said. "I hear you, but the offer stands if you change your mind. I work at the Barrett Ranch about 15 miles north of here. It is my family's place. My sister and her husband run it mostly, but they always need help with the horses. You could work there if you wanted, earn your own way, no strings." "No strings," Rebecca repeated, her voice heavy with disbelief. "Men always say that. They always say things they do not mean." "I reckon some do," Will said, "but I am not some men. I am just me, and I say what I mean." He touched the brim of his hat. "You take care of yourself, Miss Norton." He turned and walked back toward his horse, leaving Rebecca standing in the middle of the street with the sun beating down and her thoughts tangled up like barbed wire. She wanted to dismiss him, to forget this entire encounter and move on like she had planned. But something in the way he spoke, in the way he had helped without demanding anything in return, had created a small crack in the armor she had built around herself. She shook her head and continued to the boarding house. She could not afford cracks. Cracks led to openings, and openings led to pain. That evening, Rebecca packed her few belongings and paid Mrs. Henderson for the week's room and board. She counted her remaining money and realized with sinking certainty that she had maybe enough for another week in another town, if she was careful. The jobs she found were always temporary, always low-paying. Women did not have many options in 1878, especially women traveling alone with no references and no family. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to decide whether to head west toward Wyoming or south toward Colorado when someone knocked on her door. Rebecca tensed, her hand moving to the derringer, but the voice that came through the door was female. "Miss Norton, it is Emily Barrett." "Will's sister. May I come in?" Rebecca opened the door cautiously. The woman standing in the hallway was perhaps 30 years old, with kind eyes and dust on her split riding skirt. She had the same dark hair as her brother and the same steady way of looking at people. "Will told me what happened in town today," Emily said. "Told me about those men and about you. He also told me you are fixing to leave." "That is right," Rebecca said. "Well, before you go, I wanted to make that offer myself, woman to woman. We really do need help at the ranch. I have been trying to gentle a string of wild horses we bought last month, and I could use another pair of hands, someone who is not afraid of hard work." Emily paused. "Will said you turned him down, said you do not trust men. I respect that, but maybe you could trust another woman. Maybe you could give us a chance to prove we are not like whoever hurt you." Rebecca felt something tighten in her chest. She wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the walls she had built, but she was tired. Tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of counting pennies and wondering where the next meal would come from. "How much does it pay?" she asked. $30 a month plus room and board," Emily said. "It is hard work, sunrise to sunset most days, but it is honest work. And the ranch is remote enough that those debt collectors would have a hard time finding you if that matters." It mattered. It mattered more than Rebecca wanted to admit. "1 month," Rebecca said finally. "I will try it for 1 month and then I decide if I stay or go." Emily smiled. "That is all I ask. Come tomorrow morning. Will can show you the way if you meet him at the livery at dawn." After Emily left, Rebecca sat back down on the bed and stared at her packed bag. She was taking a risk, trusting these people even a little bit. But maybe a calculated risk was better than running blind into nothing. Maybe she could work for a month, save money, and be in a better position to move on when the time came. It did not mean she had to trust Will Barrett or anyone else. It just meant she was being practical. She did not sleep well that night. Her dreams were full of Thomas's face, his lies, the way he had looked at her with such sincerity while planning his betrayal. She woke before dawn, dressed in her most practical clothes, and made her way to the livery as the sun was just starting to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. Will was already there, saddling a gentle-looking mare. He looked up when she approached and nodded in greeting. "Morning, Miss Norton." "Rebecca," she said. "If I am going to be working with you, you might as well call me Rebecca." "Rebecca," he repeated like he was testing how the name felt. "This is Rosie. She is yours to ride out to the ranch." Rebecca took the mare's reins and mounted up without assistance. She had learned to ride as a girl, back when life was simpler and men were still just her father and brothers, before she learned how much damage they could do. The ride north took them through open prairie land, waving with summer grasses and wildflowers. The sky stretched endless overhead, that particular shade of blue that only seemed to exist in the west. They rode in silence for the first few miles. Rebecca was aware of Will beside her, keeping an easy pace, never pushing or trying to force conversation. It should have been awkward, but somehow it was not. It was just quiet, the kind of quiet where you could hear meadowlarks singing and the wind moving through the grass. "Can I ask you something?" Will said eventually. You can ask, Rebecca said. I might not answer fair enough. That man you mentioned, the one who made you swear off trusting men, was he the one who put you in debt to those collectors? Rebecca stared straight ahead. He was my fiancé, Thomas Whitley. He was charming and kind and said all the right things, made me believe we would have a life together. Then he started gambling, using my name to get credit he could not get on his own. By the time I realized what he was doing, he had run up thousands of dollars in debt and disappeared, left me holding all of it. That is a hard thing, Will said quietly. Hard does not begin to cover it, Rebecca said, and she could hear the bitterness in her own voice. I lost everything. My reputation, my savings, my home. Had to leave Kansas City because his creditors were hounding me day and night. They did not care that I did not spend the money. My name was on the papers, so I was responsible. She turned to look at Will. So yes, I meant what I said. I will never trust another man as long as I live, and if you have a problem with that, I can turn around right now. Will was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. I do not have a problem with it, he said. Trust is earned, not given. You have no reason to trust me yet. Maybe you never will. But that does not mean I cannot be patient. I can wait however long it takes, or forever if need be, for you to see that not all men are like Thomas Whitley. I can wait forever, Rebecca repeated softly. The words settled between them like a promise, and she did not know what to do with that. The Barrett Ranch came into view over the next rise, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. The main house was solid timber construction, built to last, with a wide porch and shutters painted green. There were several barns, a stable, corrals, and a bunkhouse. It looked prosperous but lived in, the kind of place where people worked hard and cared about what they built. Emily came out to meet them, along with a sandy-haired man she introduced as her husband, James Norton. They were welcoming but not pushy, showing Rebecca to a small room in the main house that would be hers. It was simple but clean, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the horse corrals. We eat breakfast at sunrise, dinner at noon, supper at sunset, Emily explained. You will work with me mostly with the horses. Will can show you around the property this morning so you know where everything is. The work started immediately. Will took her through the ranch, pointing out the different areas, explaining how they operated. The Barretts raised horses primarily, buying wild stock and gentling them for sale to the army, to ranchers, to anyone who needed good working animals. It was clear Will knew horses inside and out, could read their moods and movements like some people read books. Rebecca found herself watching him as he worked with a young stallion in the corral, his movements patient and sure. He never forced the horse, never lost his temper when the animal shied or kicked. He just waited, giving the horse time to learn to trust him. She wondered if that was how he approached everything in life, with that same steady patience. The days fell into a rhythm. Rebecca worked alongside Emily, learning to gentle the wild horses they brought in. It was difficult, sometimes dangerous work. She got stepped on more than once, got thrown twice, but Emily was always there, teaching her, encouraging her. For the first time in months, Rebecca felt like she was building something instead of just running away. Will was around often, working on other parts of the ranch, but always nearby if she needed help. He never pushed, never tried to get closer than she allowed, but he was present. He would show up at dinner with wildflowers he claimed he just happened to pick. He would offer to saddle her horse in the morning, saying he was heading to the barn anyway. Small gestures that asked nothing in return. 3 weeks into her stay, Rebecca was working with a particularly stubborn mare when the horse suddenly reared, striking out with her hooves. Rebecca jumped back, but not fast enough. The hoof caught her shoulder, spinning her around and slamming her into the fence. Pain exploded through her left side and she heard Will shout her name. Then he was there, pulling her away from the mare, his hands checking her for injuries. "Rebecca, are you all right? Can you move your arm?" she tried and gasped at the pain. "I think so, just bruised." "Come on," Will said, and before she could protest, he had lifted her carefully and was carrying her toward the house. Rebecca wanted to tell him she could walk, wanted to maintain her independence, but the pain made her dizzy and his arms felt steady and safe. Emily met them at the door and helped get Rebecca into a chair. They checked her shoulder carefully, determined nothing was broken, and wrapped it to keep it stable. Will brought her water and hovered nearby, his face tight with concern. "I am fine," Rebecca said, more sharply than she intended. "You do not need to fuss." "I know I do not need to," Will said. "But I am going to anyway, so you might as well get used to it." Emily left them alone, claiming she needed to check on something in the kitchen, though Rebecca suspected she was giving them privacy. Rebecca looked at Will, really looked at him, and saw genuine worry in his eyes. Not possessiveness, not calculation, just honest concern for another person's well-being. "Why do you care?" Rebecca asked. "You barely know me." Will pulled up a chair and sat down facing her. "Maybe that is why, because I want to know you. I have wanted to since the day I saw you standing up from behind that flour barrel, fierce and frightened and refusing to give up. You are the strongest person I have met, Rebecca Norton, and I admire that. I admire you." "Admiration is not trust," Rebecca said, but her voice was softer now. "No, it is not," Will agreed. "But it is a start. And I meant what I said that first day. I can wait. I can wait forever if that is what it takes for you to believe that I am not going to hurt you, that I am not going to lie to you or betray you or any of the things that man did." Rebecca felt tears burning behind her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had not cried in months, had not allowed herself to cry, because crying meant feeling and feeling meant pain. But sitting here in this kitchen with the afternoon sun slanting through the windows and Will Barrett looking at her like she was worth waiting for, something inside her began to crack open. "I do not know if I can," she whispered. "I do not know if I can trust anyone again. What if I try and I am wrong? What if you are just better at lying than he was?" Will reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently took her good hand in his. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, solid and real. "Then you will survive it, just like you survived Thomas Whitley." "But Rebecca, I am not lying. I am not that kind of man. My word means something to me, and when I tell you something, it is the truth. That is all I can offer you, my truth and my time." She looked down at their joined hands and made a decision, not to trust completely, not yet, but to try. To take one small step toward believing that maybe, possibly, there were good men in the world and William Barrett might be one of them. "All right," she said. "All right." Summer turned to autumn and Rebecca stayed. Her month came and went and she did not leave. She told herself it was because the work was good and the pay was fair. But deep down she knew it was more than that. She was staying because of Will, because of the way he smiled at her across the dinner table, because of the quiet conversations they had in the evenings when the work was done, because of the way he made her laugh when she had forgotten how. He courted her slowly, with old-fashioned patience. He asked permission before taking her hand. He invited her on rides through the prairie, just the two of them, showing her places where the sunset turned the grass to gold, and where antelope grazed in herds that stretched to the horizon. He told her about his life, about losing his parents when he was young, about building this ranch with his sister and learning to be the kind of man who kept his word. And gradually, piece by piece, Rebecca felt her walls coming down. It terrified her. Every time she caught herself looking forward to seeing him, Every time her heart jumped when he walked into a room, she felt fear alongside the joy. What if she was making a mistake? What if she was setting herself up for heartbreak all over again? One evening in late October, they were sitting on the porch together, watching the stars come out. Will had brought a blanket to wrap around her shoulders against the autumn chill, and they sat close enough that she could feel his warmth beside her. "Rebecca," Will said quietly, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I am in love with you," he said simply. "Have been for weeks now, maybe since the beginning. I know you are not ready to hear it, and I do not expect you to say it back. I just needed you to know. Needed to be honest about how I feel." Rebecca's breath caught. She turned to look at him, saw the vulnerability in his eyes, and felt something break open inside her chest. All this time, she had been so focused on protecting herself from being hurt that she had not realized she was also protecting herself from being loved. And here was this man, this good and patient man, offering her his heart with no guarantees, no demands, just honest affection. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am so scared, Will." "I know," he said. "But you do not have to be scared alone. Whatever you are feeling, whatever you need, I am right here. I am not going anywhere." She leaned against him then, letting him put his arm around her, and they sat together under the vast Nebraska sky. She was not ready to say the words back yet, not ready to fully surrender her fear, but this felt like enough. This felt like a beginning. Winter came to the prairie with snow and bitter wind. The ranch work continued but moved indoors more often, caring for the horses in the barns, mending tack and equipment. Rebecca and Will spent more time together, drawn by proximity and by choice. She found herself seeking him out, wanting his opinion on things, wanting his company. On a cold December evening, a blizzard rolled in faster than anyone expected. Will was out checking the far fence line and had not returned by dark. Emily paced the kitchen, worried, while James prepared to go looking despite the whiteout conditions. "I am coming with you," Rebecca said, pulling on her heaviest coat. "Rebecca, it is too dangerous," Emily protested. "He is out there because of this ranch, because he always thinks of everyone else first," Rebecca said, and she could hear the fear in her own voice. "I am not sitting here doing nothing." They rode out into the storm, James in the lead with a lantern, Rebecca following close behind. The wind drove snow into their faces until they could barely see the ground beneath their horses' hooves. Rebecca's hands were numb inside her gloves, her face burning with cold, but she kept going. She had to find him. She could not lose him, not now, not when she was finally learning what it meant to love someone who loved her back. They found him near the creek, his horse standing over him where he had fallen through thin ice. James and Rebecca pulled him out together, soaking wet and barely conscious. They got him across James's horse and raced back to the ranch, where Emily had the stove blazing hot and blankets ready. Rebecca helped strip off his frozen clothes, too scared to be embarrassed, and wrapped him in quilts while Emily made hot coffee. His lips were blue, his skin ice cold, and Rebecca sat beside him rubbing his hands, trying to get the blood flowing again. "Come on, Will," she whispered. "Come on, you do not get to leave me now. You said you would wait forever. You promised." His eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. "Rebecca, I am right here," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I am right here, and you are going to be fine. You have to be fine." "Cold," he mumbled. "I know, but you are going to warm up. Just stay awake, stay with me." She sat with him all night, changing the warming stones Emily brought, making sure he drank hot broth when he could, talking to him constantly to keep him conscious. Emily and James checked in periodically but gave them space, recognizing something in Rebecca's devotion that went beyond simple concern. By morning, the blizzard had passed, and Will's color was returning to normal. He was still weak but out of danger. Rebecca finally allowed herself to doze off in the chair beside his bed, exhausted from fear and relief. She woke to find him watching her, a soft expression on his face. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," Rebecca said, sitting up and wincing at her stiff muscles. "Where else would I be?" "I heard you," Will said quietly. "Last night when you were talking to me, you said I promised to wait forever, like that mattered to you." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "It does matter. You matter." "I have been trying not to admit it, trying to protect myself. But last night when I thought I might lose you, I realized I was protecting myself from the wrong thing. I was so busy being afraid of being hurt that I was hurting myself by pushing away the best thing that has ever happened to me." "Rebecca," Will started, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish. I love you, Will Barrett. I am still scared and I still have scars and I probably always will, but I trust you. For the first time since Thomas, I actually trust someone. I trust you with my heart, even though it is battered and bruised, because you have proven every single day since we met that you are worth trusting, that you are the kind of man who keeps his word." Will smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "I love you too. And I am going to keep proving it every day for the rest of our lives if you will let me." "Is that a proposal?" Rebecca asked, half laughing, half crying. "Not yet," Will said. "When I propose, I am going to be able to stand up and do it properly, but consider it a warning. It is coming." She leaned down and kissed him then, gentle and sweet, and felt something settle into place inside her chest. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Safe and exciting at the same time, challenging and comforting, something built on truth instead of lies. Will recovered over the next few weeks, growing stronger each day. By January, he was back to full health and full duties on the ranch. True to his word, he proposed on a clear winter morning, getting down on one knee in the snow in front of the barn, and offering her a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. "I know you said you would never trust another man as long as you lived," Will said, holding the ring up to catch the sunlight. "And I know I said I could wait forever, but I am hoping you do not make me wait quite that long. Will you marry me, Rebecca Norton? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that your trust was not misplaced?" "Yes," Rebecca said, pulling him up and kissing him soundly. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in the spring of 1879 in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Emily and James as witnesses and half the town of North Platte in attendance. Rebecca wore a dress Emily helped her make, simple white cotton with lace at the collar, and carried wildflowers from the prairie. Will wore his best suit and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. When the preacher asked if she took this man, Rebecca said, "I do," without hesitation. She meant it with every fiber of her being. She trusted him, she loved him, and she was ready to build a life with him. Their first year of marriage was everything Rebecca had once dreamed of and thought she would never have. Will proved to be exactly the man he claimed to be, honest and hardworking and devoted. They built a small house of their own on the ranch property, close enough to the main house for family but far enough for privacy. They worked together every day, breeding and training horses, building something that belonged to both of them. There were hard moments too. Times when old fears surfaced and Rebecca found herself pulling back, waiting for the betrayal that never came. Will was patient through all of it, giving her space when she needed it, reassurance when she asked for it, and love constantly. He kept his promises, every single one, and slowly Rebecca learned that she could rely on that. Could rely on him. In the fall of 1879, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had always wanted children, but after Thomas, she had thought that dream was dead. Now here it was, real and growing inside her, and she was scared of how much it mattered. "What if I am not a good mother?" she asked Will one night, lying in bed with his hand on her stomach. "What if I am too damaged from everything that happened?" "You are going to be an amazing mother," Will said firmly. "You are strong and brave and you love fiercely. Our child is going to be lucky to have you." "And you," Rebecca said, covering his hand with hers. "They are going to be lucky to have you too." Their son was born in May of 1880, during a thunderstorm that shook the windows and made the horses restless in the barn. It was a hard birth, long and painful, but Emily was there helping, and Will never left her side. When the baby finally came, red-faced and squalling, Rebecca held him and felt a love so intense it was almost painful. "He is perfect," Will said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. You are both perfect." They named him Samuel William Barrett, and he became the center of their world. Will was a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching his son about horses and the prairie from the moment Sam could sit up. Rebecca found that motherhood came more naturally than she expected, her protective instincts and fierce love serving her well. The ranch prospered over the next few years. The Barrett horses developed a reputation for quality, and they had more business than they could handle. Will and James expanded the operation, bringing in more stock, building new corrals. Emily had 2 children of her own, daughters who played with Sam and grew up running wild across the prairie. Rebecca sometimes thought about Thomas Whitley and what her life would have been like if she had married him. She was grateful in a strange way that he had betrayed her. If he had not, she never would have fled west. She never would have met Will. She never would have learned what real love looked like. She was working in the garden one summer afternoon in 1883 when a stranger rode up to the ranch. Rebecca straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt a jolt of recognition. It was Calhoun, the debt collector from 5 years ago, though he looked older and more worn down. Will came out of the barn, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun, but Rebecca held up her hand. She walked to meet Calhoun, her chin up, unafraid. "Miss Norton," Calhoun said, then corrected himself. "Mrs. Barrett, I suppose." "What do you want?" Rebecca asked. "To apologize," Calhoun said, and he looked sincere. "And to tell you the debt is cleared. Thomas Whitley was caught in St. Louis last year, tried for fraud. Turned out you were not his only victim. When the courts sorted everything out, all the debts in your name were forgiven. You are free and clear." Rebecca felt something ease inside her chest, a tension she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. "Thank you for telling me." Calhoun nodded. "I am not a good man, Mrs. Barrett, but I am trying to be better. That day here in North Platte when your husband faced me down, it made me think about the kind of life I was living. Thought you should know it mattered." He touched his hat and turned his horse, riding away without looking back. Will came to stand beside Rebecca, putting his arm around her waist. "How do you feel?" "Free," Rebecca said slowly, testing the word. "I feel free." That night they sat on the porch of their house, watching Sam play in the yard while the sun set in glorious shades of orange and red. Will held her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "You ever regret it?" Rebecca asked. "Waiting for me to trust you, it took so long." "Not for a second," Will said. "You were worth waiting for, you still are. Every day with you is a gift, Rebecca. Every day I get to wake up next to you, work beside you, watch our son grow, that is everything I could ever want." Rebecca leaned against his shoulder, feeling content in a way she once thought impossible. "You know what the funny thing is? I really meant it when I said I would never trust another man as long as I lived. I believed that completely." "What changed?" Will asked. "You did," Rebecca said. "You changed everything. You were patient when I needed patience. You were honest when I needed truth. You showed me that trust could be rebuilt, that love did not have to mean pain. You waited forever, just like you said you would, even though forever turned out to be shorter than we both expected. Not forever, Will said. Just until you were ready. They had 3 more children over the years, 2 daughters and another son. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Sam grew up to be as skilled with horses as his father, and the daughters inherited their mother's fierce determination. The little house they had built became too small, so they expanded it, adding rooms as the family grew. Rebecca never forgot the lessons she learned during those dark months after Thomas's betrayal. She never forgot what it felt like to be broken and alone. But she also never forgot what Will taught her, that trust was not about being stupid or naive. It was about choosing to believe in someone who had proven themselves worthy of that belief. It was about taking a risk on love, even when you were scared, because the alternative was living half a life. She taught her children about trust, about how it was earned, and how it should be given carefully but not withheld completely. She taught them to be strong and independent, but also to recognize when someone was offering genuine love and support. She taught them that being hurt did not mean you could never heal, that being betrayed did not mean everyone would betray you. Will kept every promise he ever made to her. He was there through births and deaths, through hard years when the ranch struggled and good years when they prospered. He was there when her nightmares came back, holding her and reminding her that she was safe. He was there through everything, just like he said he would be. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, they rode out to the place where he had proposed, that spot in front of the barn where the snow had caught the sunlight. It was summer now, hot and bright, and their children were all at the main house with Emily's family for a celebration. 20 years, Rebecca said, looking at the man beside her. His hair was touched with gray now, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, but he was still the same Will who had faced down gunmen in the street for a woman he did not know. I cannot believe it has been 20 years. Best 20 years of my life, Will said. He reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. You made me wait exactly as long as I needed to. Not forever, but long enough to prove I meant what I said, long enough for you to trust me. I said I would never trust another man as long as I lived, Rebecca said, smiling. Turns out I was wrong. I trust you with my life, Will Barrett, with my heart and my children and everything I am. And I would make the same choice again, every single time. I said I could wait forever, Will replied. And I meant it. But I am glad forever was shorter than we thought. I am glad we got these 20 years, and I am looking forward to 20 more. They stood there together in the summer sun. 2 people who had found each other when both were lost, who had built a life on patience and honesty and love that endured. The prairie stretched around them, golden and endless, full of possibility and promise. And in that moment, Rebecca Norton Barrett knew without a doubt that she had made the right choice all those years ago when she decided to take a chance on a cowboy who said he could wait forever. Because he had waited and she had trusted, and together they had created something beautiful and lasting and true. Their story became part of the family legend, passed down through generations. The great-grandchildren would ask about how their great-grandparents met, and someone would always tell about the day a woman swore she would never trust another man as long as she lived, and a cowboy promised he could wait forever. They would talk about patience and trust, about how love was not always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. They would remember that sometimes the best things in life came to those who waited, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was give someone a chance to prove themselves worthy of your trust. Rebecca and Will lived long lives together, growing old on the ranch they built, surrounded by children and grandchildren. When Rebecca passed in 1923 at the age of 68, Will held her hand and told her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. When Will followed her 2 years later, his last words were about how he would find her again, how he would wait forever if he had to, because she was worth waiting for. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, where the prairie grass waved in the wind and the sky stretched forever overhead. Their story lived on in the family they created, in the ranch that still bore their name, in the legacy of love and trust they left behind. Because they had proven that even the most broken heart could heal, that even the deepest betrayal could be overcome, and that sometimes, when you meet the right person, forever does not have to be as long as you think.